fundamental question that I always ask is, pitched roofs are hopeless for us because the tiles tend to come off, you damage the tiles, but to look at, I mean, I would love that the stone is, it's just weathered, isn't it? Most of the work I do is commission based, so somebody says to me, we've got a building, we want a performance on it, let's just show, or we want to do a vertical dance performance, and I go, well, what's your building? And they go, oh, we haven't got one yet. And I'm like, okay, well, can you suggest? So I kind of always start with the building for a building based piece because it's ultimately very site specific in that the choreography is quite governed by the architecture, what we can rig off safely, and then I tend to proceed from there. I need to know what's physically possible before I can get into the kind of creative side of it, because you know, I might have something in my mind that is completely impossible. So that it's an interesting starting point. It comes from what's available. So it's quite a logistic starting point. And then once I know what's available, I can start to imagine what the creative response might be. So for example, there's a building in Llandudno in North Wales, which is a Victorian seaside town, but the building is called Venue Cymru, and it's a big, massive, civic, modern theatre building. It's not Victorian at all. So they commissioned me to make a piece of work for the front of the building. Now the front of the building doesn't go like that. It goes down, across, down, across, down. So I was like, well, what am I going to do? So the first thing I did was establish the top rigging points, and then I had a week working with 2 dancers, and I developed a concept around 2 Victorian ladies who land on the roof of the building, and they need to get down, cross the road, and go into and they end up in the sea. But they're Victorian travellers, and Victorian lady travellers. And so, and then from that, I had to devise rigging system, because I wanted to have 1 rope per dancer that went all the way to the ground. So the dancers had to, because you generally don't put, if you put a rope over an edge, it needs to be protected, because otherwise eventually you just saw through the rope. So I had to devise all these systems to get this rope down the building safely with the dancer on the end of it. So in that circumstance, it was about setting myself a problem and resolving it through the choreography. But in other circumstances, it may be that, well, this is the building, the thing I'm working on at the moment, which I can't say too much about, but it's the opening of a new apartment block, and they want essentially a ribbon cutting ceremony through vertical dance. So, and in the colours, in the brand colours of the real estate company. So for me, that's a kind of massive challenge, because there's that one idea of cutting a ribbon and this huge building and 6 dancers. Every project is completely different, and in that sense it's very site specific. However, I've done projects where I've made a piece in one place and then I've moved it to lots of different places, and one of them was a piece I made for some balconies, which they were just railings, so there was no solid surface apart from a handrail which we used as a dance floor, and then I remade it for a blank wall, so it's completely different. And then I had to remake it again for a sandstone building actually in Boston, old law courts. The window frames were really delicate, so you just really tiptoe on them, and there was no no surface where you could swing, and it was all about reworking it for the architecture. I don't know if you know Bristol Docks, but you know the cranes, those big old cranes, that was my first site. So there's nothing there which allows you to do anything which you think of as conventional vertical dance, which is kind of a blank wall and a dancer swinging around. So the whole project was around putting people on this crane and creating movement around an idea. And I worked with the idea of, from the film Wings of Desire, and the idea of these angel characters watching over the city. So it was very much about putting real people in these places and then choreographing like a bit of a zip wire onto the M shed. So they came from the crane onto the gallery building. But then a couple of weeks later, I had to transfer that idea onto a car park in Worthing. And it was both buildings were amazing. The car park is this really, really long, it's called the Grafton Street car park, and it looks like a film strip. It's very, very long, and it's got these windows going across. And I'd always wanted to choreograph on a car park because I love it when dancers pop out of windows and go back in and pop out. So for me, it was like, yes, fantastic. They only gave me a day. And so I had to transfer that idea onto this building. And it kind of was like, oh, this is so on-site specific to take something you've made in one site and put it somewhere else. But actually, I totally loved the challenge. I kind of started doing vertical dance on a cathedral. You know, so my second building was the Guildford Cathedral. There are buildings that terrify me. I kind of go, I think it's usually when it's such a big scale that you kind of go, wow, what impact can I have and how frightened am I going to be? I mean, I worked on Guildford Cathedral and talked to the Dean about what I was going to present. And my idea was there's this huge golden angel that's a weather vane on the top of the cathedral, and my idea was that the angel comes down. That doesn't mean that I feel religious about that, but the figure, I think the iconography of angels is kind of really interesting in terms of what, first of all, a connection between the sky and the earth. That doesn't need to be a religious connection. Something to do with aspiration. The upwards direction is aspirational. It opens your chest when you look up, and then something about guardianship. So you have this angel on the top of the cathedral as a sense that there's something watching over you. You know, I'm not religious, but it was quite a spiritual experience because this building is so big, and you can see people on the ground below you, and feeling that you're embodying this kind of guardian spirit. It's really interesting because immediately when I think of cathedrals, I always think of the still unfinished Barcelona Sagrada Familia. And I went there years ago, and it was really quite unfinished. And I remember going up one of the towers and walking across a little ferry bridge between the towers, and just getting the sense of like, whoa, this is really quite something being up here, because it's like a ferry bridge over a river, but it's between these towers right up in the sky. I'm not sure you can still do that, but now it's much more touristically organised in terms of how you can move around the space there. But the inside of the cathedral is extraordinary, that because that wasn't finished when I went years ago, and so the light comes in, so you feel like the outside is coming into the cathedral in a way that's really different from any other cathedral I've ever been into. And the architecture creates this sense of being in a forest. It's really extraordinary. And looking at this, I'm like, it's like seeing the inside of the cathedral that isn't there anymore. The project I'm working on at the moment is actually inside a theatre, but it's looking at a relationship between light and vertical dance. And I originally worked with a photonic scientist, which is light and electronics, and the science of light, really. And we're now developing it into a show for families. So we're not really using any theatrical lighting. We're using different light sources, so torches that are on the dancers' bodies, and then we have these glasses that are called diffraction grating glasses, and they turn the white light. They let you see all the colours that are in the light that you can't see with the naked eye, so it turns everything into sort of rainbows. It's quite psychedelic, and the piece, the reason I was reminded of it is because of this bit of stained glass, which reminds me of the Big Bang, which is where our piece starts. So I've been looking at lots of images of the Big Bang and the beginning of the universe, and they always have a big, bright white light in the centre, and then things cascade out. And dancing on pillars is amazing because you just wind around them. And trees. Okay. Trees are my favourite place to dance because it's that thing of dancing on a living being, and you can feel them moving in the wind. It's just, when you're used to solid architecture, it's just suddenly like, oh, I'm moving with the tree. I think something we all love to do, you know, if you've got a tall building, everybody wants to go to the top and look down. It's an amazing amazing experience for some reason. I don't know why we like it, but it's very, I don't know, something about surveying and getting a picture of everything. And it's, you know, the penthouse is always the most expensive place, isn't it? So it's, you know, it's a position of power as well. It's class related, definitely. Height and class, height and status are very linked. In Venice, in the St. Mark's Square, that was the place of the carnival, and it's just totally encircled by balconies, which is where all the rich would watch the carnival, all the hoi polloi down below.